Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing an incredible Open Grade League team that I went 17-8 with today to reach 2958 ELO. Now before we get into that, I do want to acknowledge that Mimikyu has finally released into the world of Pokemon Go. Unfortunately, it's currently banned from battle, so I can't test it out, but the moment it gets unbanned, rest assured, I will try it out and make a video. Today I'm showcasing a legend team that was created by Lucky Boy. This team worked amazingly for me. It's built around Mud Bomb Shadow Quagsire. Initially, I was pretty skeptical of Bomb Quagsire, but after testing it out, honestly, it ended up performing quite well. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and we pick up a very positive lead in game number 1, Shadow Quagsire into Empoleon. Normally this matchup is actually pretty bad for Quagsire because Quagsire's charge attacks are entirely resisted. However, that is not the case this time. We have the Mud Bomb surprise, picking up the one-hit KO, and winning the lead. In comes Altaria, and I'm going to be immediately pivoting out into Feraligatr. One thing you may notice about the team is the fact that it is triple water. And this means that if you run into certain Pokemon on your opponent's team, like let's say a Clodsire or a Carbink, it's pretty much a free win because you have 3 counters to that Pokemon. Here, my opponent makes a stone cold bait call, calling that I'm not going to go for the Ice Beam. After the fact, I realized that a lot of Feraligatrs are on Crunch, so I probably should just full send the Ice Beam. In the back, they have Gourgeist. Surely this is a problem for our triple water team, right? Wrong, because Feraligatr beats Gourgeist, Empoleon has a good matchup there. I'm going to farm up, switch into the Quagsire. I don't end up getting the catch, but my opponent's going to have to throw energy anyway. It's not like they're going to be able to incinerate down my Quagsire. They're forced to fire off energy, and that is going to seal the win. I still have a Feraligatr that is 1 away from a Hydro Cannon, and I have an entire Empoleon as well. So I can finally send out the Empoleon. No shield, because even if they go for the Shadow Ball, it's just simply not going to be enough to deny me that Drill Peck. So I get the Drill Peck, and this is going to secure the win. My opponent will put up the shield. I can pivot into Feraligatr, snipe down with the Shadow Claw, and it turns out we don't even need that Hydro Cannon as we farm down and take the win. We pick up a terrible lead in game number 2, Shadow Quagsire into Florges. Florges is a very big core breaker for this team, as it absolutely shreds both Quagsire and Feraligatr. However, just because you get a bad lead doesn't mean you should give up. I'm able to get a shield with Aqua Tail, overfarm perfectly, and call when they're going to fire off the Trailblaze and catch it onto Empoleon. Unfortunately, I am now going to be answered with a Charge Bug. I was hoping the Charge Bug would fire off energy, but it looks like they're just going to absorb the Hydro Cannon and go for a full farm down. I have a very high rank Empoleon, but unfortunately, even with that high rank Empoleon, I still don't have enough bulk to survive that final Volt Switch, and I'm unable to make it to a second Hydro Cannon. My opponent will fire off the back-to-back X Scissors. I tank the first, I shield the second, and now that they're back on their 3 cycle, I'm going to overfarm as much energy as I possibly can. If I want a chance of ever beating this Florges, it's going to be by overwhelming it with neutral damage. Back in comes the Florges. They were 2 away from the move, so I throw 1 and the Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail does get the shield. My opponent tries to go for the CMP tie, but I'm not going to fall for it. Instead, I'm going to try and see if I can double up on Aqua Tails. But unfortunately, now that I'm doubled up, I know my opponent has the Chilling Water loaded, and they win charge stack priority. So, it's time to catch another Florges move, as I'm able to save a move on Quagsire and catch Chilling Water onto Feraligatr. In the back is a Shadow Volt Switch Fortress, and we have been completely hard-countered Mon for Mon perfectly. Fortress fires off the Sand Tomb, Feraligatr survives, and I'm able to make the Hydro Cannon. Unfortunately, due to that debuff, I cannot make Hydro Cannon number 2, but I have a move loaded on the Quagsire. So in comes the Quagsire, throwing 1 Mud Shot and the move. If this takes the knockout, the Volt Switch will not register, and now it's a race. Can they Fairy Wind down? They cannot, and despite being perfectly Mon for Mon hard-countered, it does not matter. Down goes Florges, and that's a good game. Hopping into the next match, we see an absolute relic from a forgotten time, leading Shadow Quagsire into Shadow Marowak. Back in its prime, Shadow Marowak used to win the 1 shield here, but Mudslap has been nerfed, and Marowak is now pretty mediocre. Now, Quagsire very comfortably wins this matchup, and before they're even able to fire off a charge stack, I've already landed a charge stack and pressured a shield. I want to preserve the Quagsire, because if they're staying in, they're probably core broken, so I end up making a catch and a sneak onto Feraligatr. To my surprise, my opponent does not switch out, instead they fire off energy. This should be fine. I should be able to absorb this and Shadow Claw them down. They pivot into Shadow Bug Bite Fortress, and Fortress snipes me down right as I make my Hydro Cannon. The good news is I do have a resistance to Bug Bite on this team, as in comes Empoleon. Empoleon is going to have to respect the Sand Tombs. A Shadow Sand Tomb would do way too much damage, and it lowers my defense as well. Even though Shadow Fortress is pretty frail, this is not Hydro Cannon range, so I will be forced to fire off the back-to-back Hydro Cannons. That means I'm not going to have a lot of energy, but at the very least, Fortress will be KO'd. But my opponent ends up putting up a shield, and that makes me a little bit surprised. I'm anticipating they're going to try and snipe me at -2 defense, so I pivot into the Quagsire as they send in the Marowak, denying their snipe play. In the back is Carbink, and this game is going to be a win. That's what I was talking about earlier. If your opponent has a Pokemon like Carbink, it's just basically a free win because all of your Pokemon destroy Carbink. Carbink's going to desperately try and farm down, but Shadow Quagsire makes it to back-to-back Aqua Tails. The spam is absurd. Carbink gets KO'd. Back in comes the Fortress, and now I can send in Empoleon, and we're going to go for a little bit of bad manners Drill Peck. The opponent was running Marowak Carbink. They deserve it. Drill Peck knocks out the Fortress, and we get the win. Hopping into the next match, leading Shadow Quagsire into Feraligatr. This is a matchup where having Mud Bomb is actually pretty nice as the Quagsire. Personally, I do think that overall, Stone Edge is probably still the correct move on Quagsire, but for this team, being able to surprise people with Mud Bomb was very nice. I'm able to get big damage on a Feraligatr, and now I can just save switch my own Feraligatr into the mirror. This Feraligatr is on Crunch, no debuff comes through. I'm going to overfarm and play to the CMP tie. My Feraligatr wins a lot of CMP ties, which is very, very nice. My opponent ends up putting up the shield, and I'm more than happy to shield back and then just fully Shadow Claw them down. If they don't want that to happen, they're going to have to pivot out, and the fact that they're sending in a Clodsire to a Feraligatr means they are incredibly core broken. They should always look to overfarm one before I get my move and fire off their Stone Edge, so we can take advantage of that predictable play and catch the Stone Edge back onto the Shadow Quagsire. Now I have a Feraligatr very close to a charge stack for later, and I'm going to CMP tie them Aqua Tail to the Earthquake to deny their energy. I actually go for an undercharge. I wanted to leave them at 1 HP, so that way potentially they could knock me out and I could get an energy head start on my Empoleon. But as it turns out, it's not going to matter. My opponent is very weak to water. They were double weak to water in the back, and we have triple water, so there was just never a chance. Here I'm just going to watch for a catch. They try for the catch. They do not get it, and now I get to send in Empoleon. Empoleon gets the full farm down, and my opponent will resign the match. We pick up a bit of a tough lead in the next match. Shadow Quagsire into Shadow Annihilate, and this is actually a counter Annihilate. I've seen a few Annihilate on low kick. This is the first one that I saw on counter. I fire off the Mud Bomb, hoping to try and sneak it past the shield, but my opponent is not going to let that happen. Counter has very bad pacing compared to low kick, but it does have better fast move pressure, and the counters are definitely adding up. Here, it looks like I'm not going to make it to 3 Mud Bombs, so I'm going to have to settle for an Aqua Tail as well. My opponent will go for the charge stack priority tie. They're trying to threaten my final shield, and unfortunately, I kind of have to give them that final shield, because I need to ensure that I get damage onto the Annihilate. Aqua Tail is going to land. I pivot into Feraligatr and get the snipe down. My opponent now answers with a Wigglytuff. Now this is definitely not ideal. While this is a pretty solid matchup for the normal Feraligatr, I would much rather have the Wigglytuff on my final Pokemon, which is the Empoleon. My opponent's forced to Swift on alignment, otherwise I would make the Hydro Cannon and take the knockout. Swift lands, I'm barely able to hang on, and here I will actually go for an undercharge. I don't want to take the knockout. What I want is to go for an energy head start on my Empoleon. In the back is Volt Switch Fortress, and I think I'm in a winning position. My opponent's winning play is to go for a Rock Tomb, so that way they survive the Hydro, so I go for the catch, but they just kept farming, and I think I may have found my only lose condition. They will fire off the Rock Tomb, frantically trying to debuff the Hydro Cannon, and I win charge stack priority. The game comes down to this. Does a -1 Hydro Cannon take the knockout? No, it does not. And unfortunately, I think if I just stay in, I have a guaranteed win condition because I can always bank the Hydro Cannon and reset the debuff. But by switching out, it cost me everything. We move to the next game, leading Shadow Quagsire into Galarian Corsola. Since Mud Bomb is better damage per energy than Aqua Tail, I will be firing off a Mud Bomb first in this matchup. I'm not quite sure what the most optimal way to play this matchup is as the Quagsire, but I figured I'd go for a Mud Bomb and kind of just figure it out from there. I land the Mud Bomb, they're going to be landing the Nightshade, and I'm going to look to get aggressive and send in Feraligatr. Feraligatr up energy is very scary. My opponent sends out a Go-Goat. What is this doing here? This can absolutely sweep me. I fire off the Ice Beam. They no-shield. It's like the Altaria that called it earlier. I guess people are used to Feraligatr having Crunch, but I have Ice Beam. I land the Ice Beam, shield the Leaf Blade, Shadow Claw down, and in the back is Carbink. My heart dropped when I saw that Go-Goat. I thought the game was over, but as it turns out, it's not. My opponent tried to no-shield a Crunch. They get hit with an Ice Beam, and now this Carbink, there's just nothing it can do. I have 3 counters to Carbink on the team. I save energy on Feraligatr, send in Empoleon, and back in comes the Corsola. Corsola will put up the shield, but Empoleon should be able to tank a Nightshade and astonishes very, very well here. They fire off the Nightshade, and I should be able to make not 1, but 2 more Hydro Cannons, because I'm 2 Metal Sounds away, and I shouldn't survive the next Astonish. So I fire off the Hydro Cannon. My opponent knows the win condition is to try and farm down, but I have the rank 15 Empoleon. We hang on, take the knockout with the Hydro Cannon, send back in the Quagsire, and my opponent will resign the match. We see a very familiar lead in the next match, Shadow Quagsire into Shadow Annihilate. I only faced 2 Annihilates today, and they were both actually the exact same team, so I wonder if these were trainers that ended up team building together. But after feeling like I threw the first game, I'm definitely looking for redemption in this one. I land the Aqua Tail that does significant damage onto Annihilate, and my game plan is pretty simple. I'm going to Aqua Tail to get the shield and try and snipe down with Shadow Claws. They're 3 off the move, in comes Feraligatr, and I just can't quite get that farm down. That's going to force me to burn my final shield. However, a Feraligatr up energy will be very strong. And my opponent sends in Volt Switch Fortress, and the moment they do, I know if it's the Wigglytuff in the back, the game is over. My last opponent ended up team reading that it was triple water, and they saved the Volt Switch Fortress, which was a pretty nice call. This opponent did not. Instead, they're bringing out the Volt Switch Fortress here, and this Fortress is about to have a pretty terrible day, because they lost so much HP, they can't even farm down, they're forced to fire off the Sand Tomb. I still have a Quagsire that is outside of range where Sand Tomb will take the knockout, and the moment they try and snipe with a Charm, which they should do momentarily, I can just bank the Aqua Tail, send in Empoleon, and we do get our redemption against this team. We've got a tough opponent in the next match, battling against the Japan National Champion, Salted Koji. This is a pretty bad lead without Stone Edge, so I save switch into Empoleon, and out comes Shadow Camerupt. Oh my goodness, Salted Koji bringing out the spice. You absolutely have to respect it. Unfortunately for me, this is actually the one matchup where I don't want to see Camerupt, because these Incinerates hit for neutral damage. Hydro Cannon will be double shielded. Camerupt does get enough Incinerate damage to get the farm down, and now I'm forced to sacrifice the Quagsire. Win or lose this game, it's all going to be on the back of Feraligatr, because I am not going to be shielding this Quagsire. I'm just going to let the Quagsire go and win the game with the Feraligatr. In comes Feraligatr. These Incinerates, even though they're resisted, they sure do not look at Incinerate doing so much damage. I throw 7 Shadow Claws, and I will take the knockout with Hydro Cannon. Back in comes Galarian Moltres. I'm just going to look to overfarm here to watch for a catch, and my opponent gets the catch anyway. They catch the Ice Beam onto Aegislash. Salted Koji proving why he was the 2025 Japan National Champion, as he is playing out of his mind in this game. Aegislash is a little bit tough though. I fire off Hydro Cannon, Aegislash will survive, and my opponent will immediately fire off the Shadow Ball. The good news for me is they're forced to change into Blade form, and that is very glassy. I'm going to try and commit to a farm down. Shadow Claws farm down the Blade form. I exit on 1 HP with an Ice Beam loaded. It all comes down to this. Does a non-Shadow Feraligatr Ice Beam knock out Galarian Moltres? It does not. Moltres survives. GG's to Salted Koji. What an incredible player. We get a great lead in the next match, Shadow Quagsire into Clodsire. Anytime you see a Clodsire with this team, it should basically just be a free win because you have 3 counters to that Pokemon. Switch advantage doesn't matter. In comes Feraligatr safe switch. I Mud Bomb just to get some chip damage and then bring in my own Feraligatr into Mirror. They can fire off Hydro Cannons. They're actually on Crunch, and they do get the Crunch debuff. Here I'm going to overfarm, playing to the CMP tie. This is a risk if you run a high rank Feraligatr, but my Feraligatr does have a decent amount of attack on it. I decide that I'm going to let this go, because I'm going to go for a very ambitious play, a Mudshot farm down. In comes Quagsire looking for the farm down, but I miscalculated. They survive on 1 HP, and that is going to cost me a shield. I do have a lot of Quagsire energy, and my opponent reveals their final Pokemon is going to be Galarian Moltres. I fire off the Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail is going to be no-shielded, but now I can send in Empoleon. And Empoleon is going to do very, very well here. My opponent banks energy, catches the Hydro onto Claude, because unfortunately, they know that Clodsire is completely useless. The thing I have to keep in mind is the Clodsire did do 1 Poison Sting before switching out earlier, so instead of throwing 8 in the move, I throw 7 to CMP tie with the Earthquake. That will take the knockout, and at this point, my opponent doesn't really have any win conditions. I'm just going to shield, force the final shield with Hydro Cannon, and then farm them into a range where Aqua Tail will knock out. My opponent goes for the Hail Mary win con of the Brave Bird, but I have so much energy stored on the Quagsire that it's going to be a win anyway. We get the shield, there's the combo play with the Shadow Quagsire, and Clodsire lead is basically the best thing you can see with this team because you're always going to have answers. Hopping to the final match, we see a familiar lead matchup, and this is a very bad one for us, leading Shadow Quagsire into Florges. Here, I do make a bit of a misplay. What I should do is fire off the Aqua Tail right away, because if I go for the Mud Bomb, I can CMP tie on a potential Chilling Water. So this is going to make this matchup very difficult. I'm going to bank the Mud Bomb, catch what should now be a Trailblaze onto my Empoleon, but as it turns out, my opponent went for the Chilling Water again. Now they send in Empoleon. I'm debuffed. I'm down a shield. I'm in an Empoleon mirror, and this game seems absolutely impossible. There just simply is no way out. Their Hydro Cannons do way more than mine because I am at -1 attack. I'm firing off the Hydro Cannon just to try and burn the switch timer. If my opponent doubles up, maybe the timer can come up. I click the switch, but my timer was like a quarter second from being up, and unfortunately, I'm forced to burn the final shield. I do, however, get a catch onto my Feraligatr, so I bank a ton of energy everywhere, but I'm down 2 shields, and my opponent reveals their final Pokemon is going to be a non-Shadow Quagsire. If they're on Stone Edge will be enough to secure the knockout onto my Feraligatr. If they're Mud Bomb, I think that I can hold on. My opponent farms up to 9 Mud Shots. I'm crossing my fingers, hoping that it's not the Stone Edge, but it is. They're now 1 away from the Aqua Tail. I have so much energy on the Empoleon, but I am incredibly low. I bring in Empoleon, fire off the Hydro Cannon. My opponent now has the Aqua Tail. I do win Charge Attack priority, but I'm actually going to go for a catch onto the Quagsire. I need to ensure that both of my Pokemon have a lot of energy at all times. So that way, if the Florges ever re-hits the field, then I can kind of just overwhelm it with damage. I farm up to the back-to-back Aqua Tails, take the knockout onto the Quagsire, and back in comes the Florges. I farm up to the back-to-back Aqua Tails, going for the Mud Bomb to cover for a catch onto Empoleon, but instead they just stay on the field. Mud Bomb gets the shield, they undertap, I'm not able to make my Aqua Tail, and the game comes down to this. A low-health Empoleon with all the energy it could ever want, they pivot into their Empoleon. Is my opponent ever in Hydro Cannon plus farm down range? I fire off the Hydro. The answer is no. I'm forced to fire off another Hydro Cannon, and the game comes down to this. Can I survive 5 Fairy Winds? They're resisted, but I'm very low. Come on, Empoleon. Empoleon makes the Hydro Cannon, winning Charge Attack priority, and we win another impossible hard counter game on 1 HP. I had so much fun getting to run this team today. Again, massive shout out to the team's creator, Lucky Boy, a trainer who was able to reach legend rank with this team. This team was so much fun to play, even in its bad matchups. I faced Florges League twice and I went 2-0 against it. As with any team, it's going to have its good matchups and its bad matchups. This team loves to see mons like Clodsire and Carbink. If it sees a rare grass type, that would be pretty catastrophic, as long as the grass type wasn't Gourgeist, because this team is pretty strong into Gourgeist in the back. But if it sees something like the Go-Goat that I saw in one of these games and Ice Beam does not land, that would obviously be a very difficult game to win. But a very cool team. Big congratulations to Lucky Boy for hitting Legend. And speaking of Legend, 2958 ELO. I did get pretty close to Legend today. We'll see if over the next week I'm able to get those last few points and make it to Legend rank myself. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed watching it, please do leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not. And an extra special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated, so thank you guys very much. And until next time, I'm in HomeSliceHenry.